everyone, and thank you for joining the teleconference today. I'm Jamie Frawley, Head of Investor Relations for Taat Lifestyle and Wellness. For those of you who are here, I'll provide a brief preamble about this call, which will also give a couple extra minutes for latecomers to join before I pass the microphone over to our new CEO, Setti Coscarella. As most of you already know, we're making some very big strides heading up to our launch beyond tobacco cigarettes, which is still on track for Q4 2020. The product has been developed and tested with excellent reception from our initial retail market testing, which took place in May, and rave reviews from the test subjects in informal trials who could not believe these beyond tobacco cigarettes did not contain tobacco. We've landed 2 national distribution deals in the US that collectively reached more than 30,000 points of sale, with one of the providers processing more than 1,000 online orders every day. Additionally, we've secured a manufacturer that can produce over 1 million sticks of Beyond Tobacco per day, which gives us tremendous bandwidth for meeting early stage demand. At the end of July, we appointed Setti Coscarella as our Chief Executive Officer. What appealed to us about him isn't just his impressive resume consisting of investment banking, management consulting, private equity, and a strategist position at Philip Morris International. What appealed to us the most is his dedication to our cause as a company. Our mission isn't just to create an alternative to tobacco cigarettes, it's to curate a sustainable approach to overcoming the global tobacco epidemic. This requires sophisticated macro-level thinking to identify the pain points for smokers who want to quit but can't, so that a possibility like Beyond Tobacco cigarettes can be positioned to create lasting positive change. We already have the product, so we're now focusing on execution, which is something Setti does best, especially when it comes to bringing tobacco cigarette alternatives to market. Setti will provide his initial commentary regarding the tobacco industry, as well as Taat and its products. This will be followed by a short Q&A session in which we'll ask Setti questions that have been submitted to us in advance, as well as questions that are asked here on the GoToWebinar. With that, I'll give you the floor to our new CEO. Take it away, Setti.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie. I appreciate the warm wishes, and I've been humbled by the response that I've received thus far. And I'm very excited to get to work, deliver on what I think the potential of this company actually is. Now, in my time at Philip Morris, I spent the vast majority of it there working on reduced risk products. The problem that we always were trying to solve is that you've got 1.3 billion smokers, and every single one of them doesn't really like the fact that they smoke. So when we created the product, we tried to isolate that smoking was actually the problem and give people a better way to consume nicotine. Now, in my time there, I spent an extraordinary effort working with thousands of smokers to better understand why they actually don't like smoking. And the main reason is the addiction to nicotine. So while I think the effort that Big Tobacco and a lot of the vape companies are undertaking is admirable, I don't think they actually have the right solution. You see, 1.3 billion people are addicted to nicotine. Every single one of these products also has nicotine. So what they've done is basically put a halo around a product that isn't solving a problem at all. Now, at Philip Morris, the general consensus is nothing is going to taste like a cigarette. Not a vape, not even our heated tobacco products, which is IQOS. I mean, you can get close, but you're never really going to get something that's an exact match. And because of that, smokers struggle to switch over to a lot of these new products. in my experience, I've seen that effort can take up to 2 months for somebody to properly get used to the new taste, the new ritual, and at least put a valiant effort in trying to adopt this new technology and product. The problem becomes these technologies leave the consumer wanting. You see, whether the battery runs out, or the pod leaks, or the taste isn't right, there's a number of issues that then force the consumer to go back to combustible cigarettes. And time again, through the countless researches and focus groups that we've conducted, after about 5 to 6 months, the vast majority of smokers start to reincorporate combustible cigarettes back into their consumption pattern. And it seems to me that the vape companies and the big tobacco companies just keep digging their heels in and think eventually everyone will switch over. But from what I see, they're wrong. Now, nicotine itself isn't the main reason why people smoke, or the main reason why they continue to smoke. If it were, then nicotine patches would work. The vapes would work. The gums, the sprays, all the other alternative nicotine delivery systems would actually work in terms of getting people off of cigarettes, but they don't. One of the main reasons for that, and this is the term that we used at Philip Morris, is in general there's a ritual that comes with smoking. So when you buy the pack and you take out the cigarette, you light it on fire and you smoke it, the billowing smoke around you. I mean, there's a whole sensory experience that goes hand in hand with the nicotine. Their view is that nicotine is enough and we can change that entire experience and people will convert en masse. After about 5 or 6 months, they end up going back. So we were kind of stuck with the product that we had. And I had ideas of potentially creating something that didn't have the tobacco or the nicotine to actually help rid the world of this particular problem, but that's not really the business any of these people are in. And then I got introduced to Taat. And we started talking about what the future could be and what we could actually do for this particular market, which is extraordinarily sizable. And when I tried the product, I honestly couldn't believe that someone had managed to figure out how to create something that tastes better than a combustible cigarette without using tobacco. And on top of that, without having nicotine. So when I look at what we actually have, and this was the main reason that I jumped over, right? I knew what the problem was. At first, I don't think everyone at Taat really understood fully what they had developed, but I did. And after having a number of discussions with them, I think they all see what the potential for this particular product actually is. And hopefully by the end of this call, all of you do as well. There isn't a smoker that wouldn't look at this product seriously. We know from my time at Philip Morris that the vast majority of smokers are looking for an alternative, but they haven't found it yet. This product actually has the ability to eliminate the global pandemic, which is an addiction to nicotine, and replace it with a molecule that's far superior. And I can say this in all honesty, even coming from a tobacco company. Nicotine is probably the most useless drug in the world. There is no efficacy to it whatsoever. It does nothing for anyone other than keep them addicted to doing that particular act it takes to consume nicotine. And the reason a smoker tends to want nicotine is because they're perpetually in withdrawal. The molecule that we're going to be putting in our Beyond Tobacco cigarettes is far superior to that. It has the ability to actually help subside those nicotine withdrawals and give a smoker a sense of comfort and satiation, while giving them a wide variety of other benefits that the inferior nicotine simply cannot do. Now, when we're able to communicate this to smokers, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't give it an honest try. And when they try it, I think the product will end up speaking for itself, much like it did for me. Funny story is I basically held off on signing the contract to come over until I was able to try the product firsthand. And the second I tried it, I immediately went back and said, give me the pen, because I knew that they had it. The product itself, in order to get into the smoker's hands, the product needs to be sold at a price point that is cheaper than what they're doing. So my particular strategy going forward would be, in any market that we launch this product, to offer it at a cheaper price than any combustible cigarette. In doing so, it gives the smoker a solid value proposition as to why they would try. And when they do, and they experience the way they feel, I think the vast majority of them will end up sticking with it versus going back to their traditional combustible cigarettes. Also, for any of them that are using vape, I know that they all crave and wish they could go back to something that was less harmful on a combustible format, and that's something that we're endeavoring to do with this particular product. So overall, I don't see any reason why a smoker wouldn't try this product, and why the vast majority of them wouldn't continue to use it, because it delivers the same experience as a cigarette in a far better way. I've been asked about what the potential for this particular market is, and I always go back to what Juul was able to do. So when you take a look at something like Juul launched in 2015. They basically created, the vape market had already existed at that point for a number of years. It wasn't really doing anything terribly interesting, and the vast majority of tobacco companies, they just kind of saw it as a also ran, for lack of better words, but nothing to be taken too seriously. And then Juul came out in 2015 and redesigned the product a little bit. Whether you think it looks like a USB stick or a kazoo, I'll leave that up to you. They added some flavors, and within 2 years, we're able to capture 75% of the e-cigarette market. And then a year after that, actually started taking a chunk out of the combustible cigarette market. And at that point, the tobacco companies started to pay attention. 3 years after they launched, Altria had enough and bought 35% of Juul at a valuation of $40 billion for a product that looks like a USB stick, that delivers nicotine with some nominal flavor, which in my mind doesn't work nearly as well as the product that we have. So when I took a lot of the learnings that I had at Philip Morris and I applied it to what I think the potential for Taat could actually be, for me it was a no-brainer. I know that we can get this product in smokers' hands. Now, what most people in the consumer packaged goods industry tend to focus on is distribution. And distribution is very important. You have to get the product on the shelf. But one thing that we did in tobacco that I think distinguishes us from a lot of other companies is we spent a lot of time focusing on the fast-moving part. So ultimately, this product is a fast-moving consumer good. And there are a number of strategies and execution pieces that I will deploy to ensure that once we get on the shelf, we have all the tools in place to make sure the product comes off of the shelf and into the consumer's hands as quickly as possible, and that we can turn through inventory extraordinarily fast. Now, I think that the future is very bright for a company like Beyond Tobacco and Taat, and I'm very excited to lead this company forward and deliver what I think can actually be achieved.
Setti,
yeah.
thank you very much for your words there. So we're going to now turn this over to a Q&A. I've got a number of questions here that I can start with. First batch has come over actually from Europe. And the first question here is, Setti, you had a leading position in big tobacco. Why why did you quit your job at Philip Morris to join the Taat team?
Well, look, I've been asked this question a number of times since I resigned, and to be completely clear, I enjoyed my time at Philip Morris thoroughly. I mean, I learned an extraordinary amount. The people were fantastic. I thought their response to the COVID pandemic was exemplary, and I mean, I really had no intention of going anywhere. I thought that I would spend the rest of my career there. But when I took a look at the efficacy of the products that we were trying to commercialize and the challenges that the consumer had, and then juxtapose that with what Taat had and what I thought Taat could do, for me it was really a no-brainer, because I know that the 1.3 billion smokers are looking for a better alternative, and I've yet to see one in any way, shape, or form that comes even close to what Taat can offer this consumer base.
Great. Next question here is, nobody's created a tobacco-free cigarette, but if it really tastes like a cigarette, it could grow to $1 billion business very fast. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, I think that's a difficult question for me to answer specifically, being in the position that I am, but I'll put it to you this way. Like I alluded to in the discussion before this, Juul launched in 2015 with a product that I think is good, but not great. 3 years later, they were worth $40 billion, and one of the biggest tobacco companies in the world had bought in. So let's say I'm half right, or a quarter right, or a tenth right. Either way, I still think I'm right at what the potential of this product can do. And I think you can connect the dots from that.
Next question is, do you think the authorities will close the tax hole for non-tobacco cigarettes fast?
Ultimately, the reason that all of these regulations exist is because the regulators have a challenge with nicotine addiction. Those regulations don't exist for a product like this, and I think that it will remain as such for quite some time because of two reasons. One, we don't have nicotine, so we're not contributing to the epidemic that they're all trying to stop. And two, ultimately, I think the product can do good for society, and it would be in line with the way regulators view this. So one of the advantages that we tend to have over tobacco is our ability to conduct marketing initiatives to actually get the product in people's hands so that they can try it. And I think that we have numerous competitive advantages over the incumbent tobacco companies because of that, both from a taxation standpoint and from a marketing standpoint. And when we start competing head to head, we'll just be able to do extraordinary things that no tobacco company would be able to match. In fact, it's almost as if it were 1965 in the tobacco business again. And at that point, that was really the heyday of what tobacco companies could do. And I think that we can definitely enjoy those benefits, but we also want to make sure that we do that responsibly to not draw the ire of the regulators. So while Juul was extraordinarily successful in its first couple of years, they did commit a couple of fumbles that I'd like to learn from. For instance, I don't want to be in a position 3 years from now where I get marched up to Capitol Hill and have to explain to a bunch of Congress people why we were advertising on Nickelodeon. So having a keen understanding of what worked and what didn't, I think will allow us to work with regulators and stay on the right side of the law and enjoy these benefits for years to come.
Great, thanks, Setti. Next question here is, what will be the biggest challenge for Taat?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for us, obviously, I think we have an advantage in terms of getting the product to market and getting it in people's hands. Realistically, I think once we actually get to market, the biggest challenge for us will be keeping up with what I anticipate the demand to be. I've seen a voracious appetite in smokers looking for viable alternatives. And like I said previously, I don't think there's anything that exists in the market that would be able to compete with what we have.
Great. Next question here is, do you think that other hemp cigarette companies can re-engineer the Taat mixture?
I think it would be extraordinarily difficult to do so. I mean, it's a complex 30-step process. And after having looked at what it is that we're doing, I think that there's a lot of innovation and novel procedures that we're undertaking. And we are aggressively pursuing intellectual property patents on our product as we speak, because there's nothing that I've seen so far that uses the process that we do. And I think that we'd be able to protect it for years to come.
Okay, just reading through some of these questions here. So Brock's asked a question, just a second here. With an abundance of hemp and CBD products already being sold in the USA, how will Taat be able to cut through the market and achieve brand awareness?
Well, again, I think for us, there's an effort that's going to need to be undertaken to educate the general public on what CBD can do versus nicotine. Basically, it becomes a Coke versus Pepsi battle, and I think that we're well equipped to do that. If you take a look at the cannabis industry as a whole, a lot of people, at least at this point, don't have a generally favorable view of the cannabis industry, because I think in general the market was mistaken in terms of what cannabis was going to compete with. Most people thought that cannabis was going to compete with tobacco, but that's actually not true. THC doesn't compete with nicotine. THC competes with alcohol. And in the cannabis industry as a whole sometimes kind of gets lumped into that particular category. The other challenge is, if THC competes with alcohol, it'd be the equivalent of giving somebody one beer and then they get drunk. How many beers do you think you're going to sell? The drug or molecule that actually competes with nicotine is CBD. And I think that we can do some very interesting work when we launch the product in educating the population that this is what CBD can actually do, the properties that it has, how it can alleviate the symptoms you would otherwise feel if you were quitting smoking, and give you a much better experience overall. So I think there's a bit of education that needs to be done, but I don't think it's something that's terribly onerous. I mean, every person that I've had a conversation with and explain it to them this way, I mean, they kind of tend to get it within a few minutes. So I don't think there's an extraordinary effort, but an effort that needs to be taken nonetheless.
The largest industries in the world. This is almost a $1 trillion global.
Thanks, Setti. Next question here. Are hemp cigarettes taxed differently than tobacco cigarettes?
And people continue to do it because it is.
Yes, insofar as they're not. So, again, one of the benefits that we have, and the reason that I think we have a competitive advantage over tobacco, is that the hemp cigarettes don't have an excise tax like traditional tobacco cigarettes do. So that effectively allows us to manufacture at a similar cost and sell it at a cheaper price than traditional tobacco while enjoying the same margins. So for me, again, I take a look at what the opportunity on a company like this actually is, and it's extraordinary, because we can give a product, market it, get it into people's hands who are smokers, and charge them a cheaper price compared to what they're smoking already. I really don't see why a smoker wouldn't give it a try. I mean, from my own experience, even working at PMI, I know for a fact the only question a smoker would ever ask when going into a convenience store and buying a pack of cigarettes is, what's your cheapest smoke? I don't think I've ever heard anyone ask, what's your best smoke? So for a product like this, if we can offer it at a cheaper price than any combustible cigarette and give them a taste experience that's superior, we get to achieve both what's your cheapest and what's your best. And I think that's something that no tobacco company can compete with, and no hemp cigarette company is doing right now.
Okay, I've got a question here from Luke. Question is, what are some of the key ways that you will use to build trust with people that want to quit smoking?
Well, I think a lot of it's going to come from endorsements. So, and again, another thing that tobacco companies are restricted in doing is going to people who use their product and getting them to talk about what their experience is. So this doesn't become a one-way conversation. It's a two-way conversation. I think once we get the product out to market in Q4, we'll have a multitude of people that'll try it and be successful in leaving tobacco and nicotine behind in lieu of using Taat. We've already gotten from some of our test markets fantastic commentary from people who say that this product has helped them end their nicotine addiction, give them a far superior experience. And I don't want to be the one that speaks for the benefit of our product. I'd rather let our consumers do that. And I don't think we'll have any issue in finding multitudes of people once they try this product who will be able to share the benefits that they've been able to enjoy and the results of being able to leave cigarettes behind entirely.
Thanks, Setti. I've got a question here. The current market cap of Taat is about $70 million. How big can this company get?
Well, I mean, I think we could, well, let me put it to you this way. I would consider myself a failure if I couldn't get it to over 5 billion.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay. Geez, coming to an end of these questions here. Let me just go through a few. I know we had Joel Demarsk as a guest co-organizer. I'm not sure, Joel, are you on the line by any chance? Just curious. Not sure if the sound worked. Okay. Let me just see if there's any more questions here. Cigarettes text. There's a question here is this product geared towards knocking out all the other smaller brands?
Well, I mean, I don't want to comment on any of our fellow competitors, but I will say this. I think there's definitely an opportunity to consolidate within the market. I see it no differently than what tobacco was in the 1950s and 60s. There were a number of small regional players that all were operating in a very fragmented industry. And then someone like Philip Morris came along that had the idea that you'd probably go out and try to buy a bunch of them. And the rest is history. I think they did okay. And for me, at least, I think there's an opportunity to look at that as well. I don't see competition to be an issue. I think competition is healthy and it helps further the category. So I welcome the competition. I encourage it, and I wish everyone great success. So I don't think it's an exercise in me trying to come and completely snuff out the industry and own it all for myself. But we're going to do what we think is right, and the results ultimately will speak for themselves.
Great. Here's a question from Marilyn. Would you be able to open up a plant in Canada?
So in Canada, the organic material that we use would be regulated under the Cannabis Act, which would then preclude us from selling in convenience stores where our consumers would normally buy cigarettes. So again, our product is going to compete with traditional tobacco cigarettes. That means we need to be in the same place that people buy cigarettes, offering it in the same format as people buy cigarettes, and ideally, or what we'll actually do, is selling it cheaper than for what the price that people pay when they buy cigarettes. In Canada, this product would need to be sold in licensed retailers that would otherwise sell cannabis. So while I think that there's an opportunity in Canada. My focus initially is to commercialize this throughout the United States as quickly as possible. And then in doing so, I think there's some branding that we end up doing in the US that bleeds over into Canada, which would allow for the product to sell through at a much faster rate in Canada. Because otherwise, to take the product and drop it into the licensed producers in Canada, I think we'd get some sell-through, but our ability to do the branding exercises like we would do in the US would be hindered. So initially, I'd like to focus on markets where we can undertake those efforts and compete toe-to-toe against the incumbent cigarette companies. And then for countries like Canada, I think in the medium term, become a lot more interesting because of the brand building and brand equity that we've been able to build in markets where we have a little bit more free reign.
Okay, we've got two more questions. The second last one is, Setti, would a big tobacco company want to buy us?
Well, considering how much they spent on Juul, look, I've been asked this question a number of times, in different manifestations. So, if Taat becomes successful, will big tobacco try to copy it because they have the resources? Will they potentially buy it? So I kind of go back to the story of Philip Morris and IQOS. So IQOS, which is our heat not burn product, was initially developed in 2001. So from 2001, they spent $8 billion and about 16 years of research to develop something that effectively toasts tobacco. And then a few $1 billion more to try to commercialize it around the world. Tobacco companies don't typically like to create things from scratch internally, because when they do, it takes 16 years and $8 billion. Alternatively, when you look at what Altria did with Juul, they had already bought some vape technology. They just thought that the Juul technology was going to be a little bit more interesting, so they ended up buying that at a $40 billion valuation. Tobacco companies in general are acquisitive by nature. Their in-house product development is not terribly great, so when they see a product starting to gain traction, they don't replicate, they buy. And for us, I think we'll be able to cause enough pain on the combustible cigarette market in the short term that potentially that's a conversation that might be had. I mean, further to this question, one thing that I've also noticed being at Philip Morris, and this is not unique to PMI, I mean, this is something that's prevalent across all the big tobacco companies. Every single one of them is focusing on next generation products. So I know for a fact that there really isn't a whole lot of people working on the combustible portfolio at all, which tells me you've got 1.3 billion people who prefer cigarettes. You're trying to force another technology they don't particularly want down their throat, and you're basically leaving that entire market wide open. That's really the opportunity that I see. Andre Kalantzopoulos, who's the CEO of PMI, has said time and time again that he wants to exit the business of combustible cigarettes within 10 to 15 years. And I'm pretty sure we'll be able to help them achieve that goal.
Thanks, Setti. Next question here is, if not Canada at this juncture, what markets outside of the US do you believe will be a more immediate natural fit for Taat?
That's a great question. It's actually a bit counterintuitive. Typically, the markets that have the highest regulation are the ones that I would tackle first. So I would look at, and again, I have to go through the regulations just to ensure that a product like this would have the freedom that we would in the United States. But countries like Australia, the UK, Ireland, those are the ones that, for me, are really interesting. I mean, if you take a look at a country like Australia, the average price for a pack of cigarettes in Australia is approaching $35. So we can take a product, I mean, I know what it's going to cost to manufacture this particular product, and I think there's significant margin to be made at $5 to $6. You could drop it in a country like Australia at $30 a pack and be very competitive with the existing tobacco cigarette market. And again, I think that the mission that this company's on in terms of helping to rid the world of a nicotine addiction, and it's a problem we can solve profitably. For me, at least, I think when regulators take a look at what we're actually trying to do and that we're helping them solve a problem of nicotine addiction, I think they'd welcome the opportunity to work with us to actually solve this big problem in the world. So, in terms of expansion, those are the markets that I would typically look at, because we'd have a lot more freedom to do the activities that we would do in the United States in order to get the product in people's hands. And, obviously a price advantage and a margin advantage that I think would be beneficial to the company and our investors.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Setti. So that's all the questions that we have from the Q&A period. They've all been fantastic, and thank you so much for everybody for using this interactive chat feature and sending us your questions. This worked out beautifully. So if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Again, it's Jamie Frawley. My email address is Jamie, Jamie, at Taat, TAATUSA.com. Please email me your questions, and we will get back to you in a very timely manner. Once again, thank you, Setti Coscarella, for joining this amazing discussion and Q&A. And thank you to all the attendees for joining today. It's been great having you on this chat, and we look forward to doing this again soon. So stay engaged, send me your questions, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.